Were you following the craze that appeared on Wall Street? Although we are in the midst of the worst global epidemic in 100 years, stockholders are increasing day by day, even though rebels and looters are turning our big cities into war zones. In fact, Nasdaq broke the highest record of Monday. Sometimes people want me to explain this rationally, and I can't because the Federal Reserve turned our financial markets into total cynicism at this point. The real economy is literally collapsing around us, but investors are doing well thanks to the fat intervention stock. It was absolutely disgusting to watch, and if Adam Smith could see what was going on, he would be back in his grave. Unfortunately, thanks to our rapidly declining education system, most Americans do not even know who Adam Smith is anymore. I can't remember another time in the modern United States history when stock prices rose rapidly as the United economy fell into a recession. What we witnessed was really strange, and it will be fascinating to see how long it can last. Meanwhile, the real economy is a huge mess. On Monday, the National Economic Research Bureau took action to notify us that the recession has finally started. It's official. The United States is in a recession. The National Bureau of Economic Research said Monday the United States economy peaked in February, ending the longest expansion in United States history at 128 months, or about 10.5 years. In truth, the announcement codifies the painfully obvious. States began shutting down non-essential businesses in mid-March to contain the spread of the coronavirus, halting about 30% of economic activity and putting tens of millions of Americans out of work. A recession is defined as a decline in economic activity that lasts more than a few months. NBER noted that may not hold true in this case. Employers shed an unprecedented 1.4 million jobs in March and 20.7 million in April, but the Labor Department unexpectedly reported 2.5 million job gains in May as states began allowing businesses to reopen in phases. Millions more jobs are likely to be added in June as more restaurants, shops, beauty salons, and other businesses start up again. On the other hand, the sky is not made of blue and moon cheese. Anyone with a half brain can see that the economy is falling apart. For example, we learned that United States factory orders decreased by 22.3% in April compared to the previous year. In April, a record decline of 10.4% on a monthly basis in March. Factory orders were expected to accelerate further and increased. However, the 13% dip in April was 13.4% lower than expected, but still worst in American history. Compared to the last year, factory orders have collapsed by 22.3%, the worst since the peak of the financial crisis. Of course, finding a worse number than this is not that difficult. See, only heavy truck sales. It fell to 37% from the same month in 2019 last month. The past 3 months have been disastrous for the segments of the shipping industry after an already difficult period that began in late 2018. In May, orders for Class 8 trucks, heavy trucks that haul most of the goods-based economy in the United States, fell 37% from low levels in May a year ago and 81% from May 2 years ago. according to today's forecasts of FTR, Transportation Intelligence. In order not to pass, the number of corporate bankruptcies increased by 48% compared to the same period of the previous year. Corporate bankruptcies spiked during May as the coronavirus pandemic slammed the United States economy, pushing the number of filings to levels recorded in the wake of the 2007-9 recession. United States courts recorded 722 businesses nationwide filing for Chapter 11 protection last month, a yearly increase of 48% according to figures from legal services firm Epic Global. But every time we get a terrible economic figure, the stock market rises even more. The worse the news, the more investors seems to like it. Every week we saw an unprecedented number of Americans apply for unemployment benefit, and at this point more than 42 million Americans have lost their jobs since this outbreak began. Still, investors continue to take these job losses as signs that they should buy more shares. Perhaps someone should spread a rumor that an asteroid killing the planet is about to shoot us, because that probably spits out investors. Of course, most ordinary Americans will not live in a fantasy world fueled by the Fed. And this new economic downturn strikes most of them extremely hard. In fact, about a third of all Americans are reported to have symptoms of clinical anxiety and depression right now. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic crash, which triggered depression-like unemployment, with 40 million initial claims filed in 10 weeks, a third of Americans are now showing signs of clinical anxiety and depression, according to new data collected by the Census Bureau. This, by far, is the most comprehensive and troubling sign yet of the psychological toll inflicted on Americans due to months of lockdowns. The Census Bureau contacted 1 million households between May 7 and 12, and about 42,000 responded, said the Washington Post. The survey was about 20 minutes long and buried deep within several questions asked respondents about depression and anxiety. Those who answered provided a laggard but clear snapshot into people's mental state at the tail end of the lockdown, where many folks were subjected to isolationism, virus fears, and widespread unemployment. The most worrying number I've ever shared with you, but I'm about to share some more worrying issues with you. We recently watched the rebels destroy large parts of our major cities in America, but when asked about violent protests, an astonishing percentage of Americans support them. A broad majority of Americans say the peaceful protests happening all across the country after police violence against African Americans are justified. 84% say so, and roughly a quarter, 27%, say violent protests in response to police harming or killing African Americans are justified. Both figures are higher than they were when similar protests rose in the fall of 2016. Then 67% saw peaceful protests as justified, while 14% felt violent protests were. There is not much of a racial or partisan difference over whether peaceful protests are justified now, but the gaps are larger over violent protests. Among Democrats, 42% consider violent protests justified in response to police violence against African Americans, while just 9% of Republicans agree. 42% Unfortunately, much more economic pain is coming, and this will only fuel further rebellion, looting, and violence. No matter what stock market investors think, these are certainly not best times. We entered a deeply disturbing new chapter in American history, and life in this country will never be the same again. Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is advised to consult an expert before making this decision.